Mom called me a parasite and said, "You're not welcome here anymore." I smiled and said, "Cool, I'll take my business elsewhere." 2 weeks later, she showed up crying at my office. That's what I said when my mother stood up at the dinner table, pointed a shaking finger at me in front of my uncles, cousins, and her bridge club friends, and said, "You're not welcome here anymore." The room had gone silent, like someone had pulled the plug on reality. All I could hear was the clinking of silverware and the old wall clock ticking above the china cabinet. But me? I just smiled, pushed in my chair like a gentleman, and said those 6 words, "Cool, I'll take my business elsewhere." That was the moment. The point of no return. But to understand why I didn't flinch when my own mother banished me from her house, you'd have to go back a few decades. Back to the boy who used to lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he had to do to finally be enough for her. I was that boy. My name is Brian. And I built my company out of a tiny apartment on the bad side of Tulsa, with 3 used monitors, a coffee pot that never worked, and more resentment than capital. My mother, Patricia, never visited. Not once. Even when I told her I'd launched. Even when I told her I'd gotten my first check. She always said the same thing. "That's nice, dear. Maybe get a real job next." See, to her, I was a parasite. She said that once when I was 17, loud enough for my friends to hear. "You just take and take," she sneered, "like a parasite feeding off this house." I remember that word vividly. Parasite. It became my fuel. By the time I turned 30, I had built a company called SignalRoot, a little tech startup that made internal communication software. Not sexy, but solid. Then AI got big, and suddenly SignalRoot was being courted by companies I used to cold email in desperation. When the deal came, a multimillion-dollar contract with a Fortune 500, we made headlines. I made the cover of Incorporated. My photo in a navy suit, arms folded, headline reading, "From the basement to boardrooms, Brian Cole's unlikely rise." But before all that, 2 weeks prior to the feature, I'd visited home. My mother's house hadn't changed. Same lace curtains, same judgmental air. I hadn't come to boast. I came because I had heard through my cousin Darlene that Mom was struggling, mortgage behind, electric company sending red notices. So I brought a check. Not as a flex. As a son. As someone who still, foolishly, wanted to help. And that night, in front of the family, I offered it. I said, "Mom, I know things have been tight. I'd like to cover the house, just for a while. Let you breathe." She looked at me, blinked, and then laughed. Like I had told a bad joke. And then it all unraveled. "Brian thinks he's a big shot now," she said. "Don't fall for it. His little computer thing, or whatever it is, he's still just a parasite." Everyone laughed, nervously. Then she stood up and said the words, "You're not welcome here anymore." And I stood up too. Calm. Composed. Years of being dismissed had taught me to stop expecting a different ending. So I said it. "Cool, I'll take my business elsewhere." And I left. 2 weeks. That's how long it took before she cracked. The article had just gone live that Monday morning. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since 6 a.m. Journalists, college classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, 2 exes, 3 if you count the one who ghosted me mid-layoff. My inbox was chaos. My LinkedIn? Nuclear. And then, at 9:42 a.m., my assistant Jessica poked her head in with that look she only reserves for true emergencies. Like when the office coffee machine exploded or when Elon Musk's people called by mistake. Brian," she said, trying not to wince. "There's a woman downstairs. She says she's your mother." I leaned back in my chair. Not surprised. Just disappointed that I was right. "She's crying," Jess added. "Wants to talk. Says it's urgent." Of course she did. I stared out the window for a few seconds. The city looked different now, not just because I was on the 18th floor of a building with my name on the lease. It looked smaller. Manageable. And Patricia Cole, after a lifetime of towering over me in judgment, looked just as small from up here. "Make her wait," I said calmly. Jessica blinked. "Sorry?" Put her in the lobby. Tell her I'm in meetings. I wasn't. I had cleared my schedule that day. But this was part of it now. She sat down in one of the faux leather chairs beneath the atrium skylight. Cried a little. Took a call. Paced. Tried to smile at the receptionist, who was too young to understand the weight of what was happening. She waited for 4 hours. By the time I buzzed Jessica and said, "Bring her in," I could see her reflection in the one-way glass of my office door. Shoulders slumped. Hair frizzed. She looked like someone who'd just lost a war she didn't know had started. She stepped inside. The last time she saw me in a suit, I was going to prom with a girl she told me wasn't in our league. Today, I wore navy again, but this time, it was tailored. This time it fit. "Brian," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Honey, I gestured to the chair. "Have a seat, Patricia." "Not Mom. Not even Mother. Just Patricia." She flinched. "I saw the article," she said, trying to smile. "I didn't realize how successful you'd become. I wanted to talk." I nodded. "Talk. Go ahead." She swallowed. "I was wrong about a lot of things. About you. You always were smart, but I didn't know you'd. I mean, your company." "Let's stop there," I said. "Let's not pretend this is about pride. This is about money. Isn't it?" Her face fell. "That's not fair." I leaned forward. "Fair? You called me a parasite. You said I wasn't welcome in your house. Remember that night? You laughed. You made everyone else laugh." She looked away. "I didn't mean it like that." "No?" I said. "Then how did you mean it, Patricia?" Silence. "I offered you help," I continued. "Not to impress you. To protect you. I still thought I had a mother. But what I had was a gatekeeper of shame. You didn't just reject me, you performed it. Publicly." Her lip quivered. "I didn't know what I was doing." "Yes, you did," I said softly. "You've always known." She started to cry again. "Brian, please. I'm losing the house. I have nothing left." I stood up. "I remember when I had nothing," I said. "I remember cold winters, eating noodles while you called me a failure. I remember working until 4 a.m. while you told people I was lazy. I remember bleeding into this dream while you told your bridge club I was still figuring things out. And now here you are. In my lobby." She stood too. "So that's it? You're just going to throw me out?" I picked up my phone. Dialed security. "No," I said. "I'm going to have someone walk you to the elevator. Because I have a company to run. One that succeeded in spite of you." Her eyes widened. She tried to speak, but the words died. As the door opened and the security guard stepped in, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You said I wasn't welcome in your home? Well, you're not welcome in mine." And just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, soft and final. It was strange, how quiet it felt afterward. Not peaceful, exactly. Just empty. Like the space she had taken up in my mind for years suddenly dissolved, and all that was left was stillness. No more inner voice trying to explain her, or rationalize her cruelty. No more longing. Just silence. Jessica came in a few minutes later with a coffee, and that look again. The one that said she had questions but was too tactful to ask. "She left without saying anything," she said gently, placing the cup on the desk. "Did you get what you needed?" I nodded, slowly. "Yeah. I did." And I had. It wasn't about making her cry. It wasn't about revenge. It was about that moment, standing tall in the office I built, while the woman who told me I'd never be anything had to ask me for help. But the strange part? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Like I had finally washed her out of the system. I had been carrying her words around for so long, words like useless, burden, disappointment. I wore them like hand-me-downs that never fit. But that day, I put them down. For good. Over the next few days, the calls came. First from her landline, 3 rings, then voicemail. Then a number I didn't recognize. Then her sister. Then Darlene. All of them carried the same message in slightly different packaging. She's sorry. She didn't know. She's not well. Can't you just talk to her? And each time, I'd reply with the same sentence. I wish her peace. But I'm no longer her son in service. That phrasing caught people off guard. Son in service. But that's what I'd been, wasn't it? Not a son in love. Not a son in joy. A son in service, serving her image, her resentment, her disappointment. I owed her nothing now. The team at Signal Route noticed I was different that week. Lighter. Clearer. The tension I carried in my shoulders, gone. I led meetings like I was born in the boardroom. We closed another deal that Friday. Jessica called it a new era. But not everything changed overnight. There was one more thing I had to face, my own reflection. Not the startup founder or the headline CEO. Just me. The man who had spent 30 years trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. So I booked a cabin that weekend deep in the Ozarks. No signal. Just pine trees, a wood-burning stove, and the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels whole. I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, staring at the morning fog, and whispered, "You did it. Not we. Not they. Just me." It was the first time in my life I gave myself credit without needing her to say it first. Want to hear what happened when she came back again? Because she did. It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened. Jessica buzzed my office, her voice unusually flat. "She's back." I didn't need to ask who. But I did ask. "Is she alone?" "She brought a man with her." Said it's her lawyer? I didn't flinch. Just closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to the glass wall. From my office, I could see the lobby 2 floors below. There she was, in that same beige coat, clutching a binder. The man next to her wore a suit too nice for the story she was trying to sell. I turned to Jess. "Tell them I'm unavailable. Indefinitely." "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. She had her chance. Now she has my silence. And just like that, I reclaimed it again. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by letting her talk to a wall. Sometimes, the loudest thing you can say is nothing. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and the city lights began their slow flicker against the skyline, I stayed behind at the office. I wasn't working. Just sitting. There was an old file in the bottom drawer of my desk. A manila folder I hadn't opened in years. Inside were a handful of photos, yellowed report cards, and a letter I never mailed. I'd written it the night I left for college. It was addressed to her. Full of hope. Full of that desperate, aching need for her to say, "I'm proud of you." I read it now and barely recognized the boy behind the pen. "I know I've disappointed you sometimes, but I'm going to make you proud. I promise." That was the last line. I tore the letter in half. Then again. Until it was just paper shrapnel across my desk, fragile remnants of a boy I no longer was. That night, I walked out of the building lighter than I'd ever felt. Because sometimes closure doesn't come in a conversation. It comes in knowing you don't need one anymore. 3 days passed before the envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name on the front, in handwriting I hadn't seen since she used to scribble notes for the school nurse. Always some vague excuse to avoid dealing with me being sick, tired, or anything remotely inconvenient. I almost tossed it. But curiosity, that old, stubborn ache, got the better of me. Inside was a single page. No greeting. No apology. Just this. "I was hard on you because I didn't know how else to be. Life never handed me anything. I thought making you tough would protect you. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I went too far. But I hope one day you'll understand." I folded the page neatly and set it on my desk without responding. Understand? Maybe. Forgive? Possibly. Forget? Never. That letter wasn't healing. It was history. Proof of the distance between us. still trying to explain herself instead of owning the damage. And that was fine. Because I didn't need her to be different anymore. I just needed her to be gone. A week later, I sat down for an interview with a major business podcast. You've probably heard of it, the kind where CEOs talk legacy, sacrifice, the grind. The host was charming, all polished shoes and curated empathy. "So, Brian," he asked midway through, "what drove you, really? What kept you going when everything seemed stacked against you?" I paused. The studio was quiet. Just the soft hum of equipment and the distant echo of traffic. "I guess," I said slowly, "for a long time, I thought success would finally earn me love. That if I just became big enough, smart enough, useful enough, someone might see me. She might see me." The host blinked. "She? My mother," I said. "She once called me a parasite. Told me I'd never amount to anything. That I was taking up space. I wanted to prove her wrong." The host leaned in, like he smelled a headline. "And did you?" I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "But by the time I did, I realized her approval was never the reward. Freedom was." I don't know how long the silence lasted, but I remember the look on his face. Like I'd said something holy? And maybe I had. I wasn't expecting the knock on my office door that Friday afternoon. It wasn't Jessica this time. It was Devin from facilities, the kind of guy who only shows up when something's leaking or someone's somewhere they shouldn't be. "There's a guy down in reception asking for you," he said, voice low. "Says he's your mom's pastor." I blinked. "What?" "Name's Pastor Raymond. Older guy, maybe 60. Suit and tie. Says it's important." I rubbed my temples. I knew the name. Pastor Raymond had led the tiny Baptist church Mom dragged me to every Sunday growing up. Back when she still made me iron my shirts and memorize verses she never followed herself. I hadn't thought about him in years. "Let him up," I said after a moment. "But bring him to Conference B, not my office." 5 minutes later, the door opened. Pastor Raymond stepped in, holding his hat in both hands. He looked older, grayer, but still carried that same gentle weight, like someone who had buried too many secrets under too many headstones. "Brian," he said, his voice still soft, still measured. "It's been a long time." I nodded once. "It has." He sat across from me and took a breath before speaking. "I came because your mother asked me to." "Of course she did. She's not well," he said carefully. "Health-wise, financially, emotionally. She's spiraling. She's lost more than she wants to admit." I folded my arms. "And I'm supposed to fix that?" He didn't answer right away. "Brian, I'm not here to guilt you. I just want to help her make peace." I leaned forward. "Let me tell you something about peace, Pastor. Peace didn't come to me wrapped in a sermon or a family photo. It came when I stopped needing the people who broke me to apologize for it." Raymond nodded, slowly. "I believe you. I can see it in your face. You've done the work. But forgiveness isn't always about them. Sometimes it's what keeps you from becoming them." That hit harder than I expected. Still, I kept my voice level. "And sometimes, forgiveness is just a new leash someone uses to pull you back in." He gave a small smile. "You've grown sharper, Brian." I didn't smile back. I had to. Sharp things don't get swallowed. Raymond sighed and stood. "She asked me to give you this." He handed me a small envelope. Plain white. Inside was a photo, a Polaroid from when I was maybe 6. I was sitting on a wooden swing set in our backyard, legs too short to touch the ground. Mom was behind me, mid-push, caught in a moment where she wasn't frowning. On the back, in shaky handwriting, it said, "I wish I'd known how to hold you better." I set the photo down. "I appreciate you coming, Pastor. But this isn't a fairy tale." "No," he agreed, walking to the door. "But maybe it doesn't have to be a tragedy either." When he left, I sat in that conference room for a long time, looking at that photo. That moment in time. And then I slid it back into the envelope and locked it away in the desk drawer. Not forgotten. Just filed. It was a month after the pastor's visit when the letter came. This one was different. Hand-delivered. On heavy cream paper with my full name written in calligraphy, Brian James Cole. Inside was a formal request, no longer from Patricia Cole, my mother, but from her lawyer. She was filing for support, claiming she had become dependent on me due to expectation of care. The letter cited a handful of articles, quotes from interviews I'd given, even the ink cover where I said I came from. Nothing but grit and a mother who made me tough. That one line. That one attempt at grace twisted into a legal noose. I should have been angry. Furious. Instead, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly her. My mother wasn't here for closure. She was here for leverage. When one door closed, she picked the lock. But what she didn't know was that I prepared for this. After the last visit, I'd brought in my legal team. Had them look into every possible avenue she might try. Every angle. Every crack in the armor I had spent a lifetime forging. I picked up the phone and called my attorney, Lana. Sharp, quiet, and brilliant in the courtroom. She's making her move, I said. I figured she would. Lana replied. Don't worry. We're not just going to block it. We're going to shut it down so hard, she won't try again. The next 2 weeks became a slow-motion war. Letters. Filings. Character assessments. My team requested Patricia's financial records, public statements, even those family videos she'd once posted of her garden parties where she joked about her lazy son playing tech genius. Every passive-aggressive jab, on the record. And then, I made a decision. I didn't just want to win. I wanted her to understand what she'd done. What she lost. So I did something petty. Maybe cruel. But necessary. I had my team send her a single-page brief, a visual summary of everything she'd missed. A breakdown of what she gave up the night she called me a parasite. There, in cold bullet points. Signal root valuation, $98.6 million. Active partnerships, 76 companies across 3 continents. Full-time staff, 114. Yearly revenue growth, 168%. Personal net worth, $22.4 million. Philanthropy arm launched $3 million committed to youth mentorships. And at the bottom, one final line in bold. All of this was offered to you once. You chose humiliation instead. We sent it with no cover letter. No signature. Just facts. A mirror held up to her pride. The response came 3 days later through her lawyer. They were withdrawing all claims. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. I sat in my office that evening, the city glowing beneath me, the weight of everything behind me. And I thought back to the nights I used to spend lying on the floor of my childhood bedroom, listening to her footsteps creak down the hall, praying, begging, she'd peek in and say something kind. She never did. And now I didn't need it. Because here's what they don't tell you about healing. It doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes healing is the act of walking through fire and realizing, you're fireproof now. A few weeks later, I stood in front of a group of young entrepreneurs at a tech conference in Austin. Someone in the back asked during Q&A, "What's the one piece of advice you'd give to someone trying to prove themselves?" I paused for a long second. Thought about all of it, the empty nights, the slammed doors, the aching need to be seen. Then I said, "Stop chasing approval from people who only feel powerful when you feel small. Build for you. Not to be loved. To be free." Afterward, a woman came up to thank me. She said it was the first time she felt seen. I smiled. Not out of pride. Out of peace. Because that was the real victory, not the money, not the headlines, not the sleek office. It was standing there, finally whole. With nothing left to prove. And no one left to chase.